Right, let's turn back specifically to the King's health. I'm joined by Jim Catto, who's Professor of Urology and a cancer expert from the University of Sheffield. Jim, very good to see you there. It does appear from what the palace is now saying that this is not prostate cancer. Is that your sense of it as well?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's all we understand at the moment. I mean, he's had a prostate operation, and I guess the cancer's been diagnosed either in the workup to that or at the time of the surgery. So it could be related to the bowel or the bladder, or it could be something from one of the other routine pre-op tests.
So what is the conclusion that you would draw in terms of the treatment? Sorry, somebody's phone is going off. Mine.
There's a huge number of cancers there. It could be an indolent cancer. So some of these cancers, bladder, bowel, can be quite indolent, and therefore they have outpatient chemotherapy and local treatments. It could be something more significant. I mean, I think we were hearing that he may have started treatments there as an outpatient, and that would suggest perhaps a more indolent nature depending on the disease as a whole.
I'm sorry, you're going to have to help me there. What is an indolent cancer? Presumably a slow-moving and lazy one.
Yeah, basically, slow-growing and lazy. So some of them can be found just as opportunistically during their operation. The more aggressive cancers have often got symptoms that you pick up on, and so they present with one problem or another.
So I'm going way beyond my medical expertise here, but the fact that this was discovered when he'd gone in for something else suggests that it didn't have symptoms and that therefore they got it relatively early.
Suggests it doesn't have symptoms. I think you can't conclude about the earliness depending on the nature of the cancer.
Okay. And so what are the range of treatments? I mean, they could go from relatively non-invasive and easy to recover from to being really quite serious in terms of chemo and stuff. If he has chemo, he could be out of action for a long time.
Yeah, and we just don't have enough information, do we? So it could be anything from a localized cancer that he's having local treatment from that has a really good prognosis to a very advanced one. I think we would hear more if it was more significant, and I think he would be having inpatient treatment rather than outpatient treatment, but we just don't know at the moment, do we?
Now, of course, everybody gets different treatment depending on where they happen to live and whether they can afford the best people and all the rest of it. How big a difference is there between the kind of treatment the King will be having in the centre of London from the top people and what would happen to Joe Ordinary somewhere else in the country with the same kind of cancer? Is there a big variation in treatment these days?
I'm afraid, Andrew, massive difference. So one of the main predictors of survival is where you live and what the deprivation and how underserved your community is. So that could reflect lifestyle choices, socio-demographic factors, all the way through to speed and timeliness of treatment. And without doubt, he's obviously going to have very fast and very timely treatment. It's not about the expense of the treatment in the NHS. It's more about the speed and the delivery of it that makes a big difference. But we know, if you take prostate cancer, which we know it isn't, the chances of having advanced disease, having spread, is threefold higher in the northwest and northeast than it is in central London. So big differences.
I knew we would get to the politics at some point in the show, Professor Catto. Thank you very much indeed for talking to me.
The thing about him is he's a very calm, kind of collective individual. He's somebody that, from obviously my time with him, I always remember him being very, when things kind of get thrown at him, he would just get on with it and would stay relatively calm and relaxed about situations. So I'm kind of visualising that it's going to be very similar. Again, I'm sure getting that news for anyone is shocking and devastating, but at the same time, he's a fighting man. He's somebody that fights, and he will. That's what he will be doing.
And as I said earlier on, also a great optimistic note in the statement that came out from the palace. It says of the King, he remains wholly positive about his treatment and looks forward to returning to full public duty as soon as possible. So this is not somebody who is consumed with self-pity about it at all.
No, not at all. And he will, he's somebody that will, obviously there's already a treatment plan, but don't forget, as it's been documented over the years, the King also is into alternatives. He's a huge believer in traditional and alternative medicines, it's been said. So I'm sure he'll be looking at all avenues of how he's going to deal with this, how he's going to take treatment for it. And, he is somebody, the thing, it's interesting from my point of view, I know how healthy he is. I know what a very healthy individual he is. And it goes to show you that you can have a very healthy lifestyle and sadly, succumb to illnesses and diseases like a lot of people do.
It's an absolute lottery. It tells you nothing about lifestyle, really. But nonetheless, what does matter, when it comes to lifestyle, what does matter is how fit you are during recovery and how well you then recover. I was talking to Ingrid Stewart a moment ago about, he is somebody who's very, very interested in what he eats, quite panicky about wanting organic and relatively pure forms of food. And I get the impression, I'm told, a man who exercises very regularly as well. So he looks after himself, yeah?
Absolutely, and I think even Prince Harry mentioned that about his exercise regimes and the kind of the way he looks after himself, and the King has obviously spoken about in various interviews about how he kind of his lifestyle, the way he eats, he tries to eat in a healthy kind of way and organic, that's the other big thing as well. So, he's very much, that's the kind of character he is. And I'm sure that will also put him into quite a good place, because I think one thing with this disease, because my late mother had it, is, it is down to changes in lifestyle and diets and things, but he's already kind of there. So, as I said earlier, he's going to be looking at obviously taking the traditional approach with medicine, but I think he'll be looking at alternative ways of things he can do as well.
Now, I know that you've worked as well with both William and Harry. You've looked after William in particular. Is this the kind of news, do you think, that might bring the brothers together?
Possibly. I mean, I don't know if it's true. I've seen in the news it said that Prince Harry's returning to the UK. So already, if that is true, then he is on his way back. And I'm sure that it will bring... Look, with all families, when they go through this kind of thing, it does unite families. So I've no doubt that it will bring the two of them together. And, the thing about Harry, he absolutely loves and adores his father. And despite what a lot of people said over the last years, I have witnessed that, I have seen that, and I know how much he adores his father. So it doesn't surprise me if he's returning to the UK to be with his father and to show support.
That's really interesting. And again, from your own knowledge, where do you think the King will spend his recuperative period? Will he be off to Birkhall, or will he go to his place in Gloucestershire, or will he stick in Buckingham Palace, which I don't think he much enjoys?
No, yeah, I agree with you on that, actually. That's my view on it. No, I think you're quite right. I have a feeling, not that I'm 100% sure, but I know how much Highgrove and Birkhall mean to him. It's places that he feels he can escape to. And, I don't know if you remember during COVID, he went up to Birkhall. He went up there just before the lockdown, and Highgrove, he spends a lot of time at, when the Queen passed, he spent a lot of time at Highgrove. So it wouldn't surprise me if he ended up spending time in Scotland and at Highgrove. But obviously the treatment, I'm guessing, is also going to be in London. So that makes me think he will probably spend more time at Highgrove during the treatment. And then maybe once it's completed, once it's done, then maybe he will escape to Scotland for a rest.
Iain, yes, in the last few minutes, obviously, well wishes, that sounds awful to say tributes, doesn't it? Well wishes pouring in from across the political spectrum. Rishi Sunak has wished that His Majesty a full and speedy recovery. Keir Starmer has said, we look forward to seeing him back to swift health. Obviously, politicians across the spectrum saying the same things, wishing him all the best, and also praising him for speaking out very, openly about this diagnosis. And obviously, that statement from the palace saying that they wanted to open up that conversation, and indeed, many cancer charities, I think, and a prostate charity has said since the King came out to speak about his enlarged prostate issue and going into hospital for that treatment, they've had thousands of people come forward to go for checks and to look at the NHS website for more information, which is obviously what the King had hoped that would do. But yes, tonight there obviously are quite a lot of questions. We don't know what stage this cancer is at. We don't know what type it's at. And we don't know exactly the extent of what kind of work the King will be able to continue. We don't know if his weekly audiences with the Prime Minister are going to be able to continue, or in what form. What I imagine what might happen is they might go on to Zoom or audio call, which is obviously what happened during the pandemic with Her Majesty the late Queen at the time. But there are a lot of questions on the fact that Prince Harry is flying back home quite so soon to be with his dad. Obviously, there are concerns that obviously, at a time like this, he will want to be with his family. We know obviously there has been some bad blood, obviously, between the family at times, but obviously Harry wanting to be with his dad. Does that show a sign that there is something very serious going on here? The palace obviously trying to project this image of calm. I think we're going to have to wait a little bit more for some of the details about exactly what the King's condition is to come out first.
And the fact that they were so open about the enlarged prostate, and yet they're not being open about the form of cancer that he's got now. I mean, I don't know what we should read into that, but there's a bit of a dichotomy there, isn't there? Natasha, thank you. Peter Hunt is LBC's royal correspondent. He joins us on the line now. Peter, very good evening to you. Let's talk about the news that Prince Harry is flying back, because on the face of it, a lot of people will interpret that this is actually very serious, given what's been happening between those two members of the royal family over the past year or two.
I'm very mindful of what you said at the starting about avoiding speculation. So I'll make sure I stick to that. I mean, I think what we can read into it is that what we can read into the statement is that the statement has been constructed to navigate that very difficult territory between the public, as in the King is head of state, Charles is head of state, and the private. You know, he's a man who's now been given a cancer diagnosis. He's a man who's now told his siblings he has cancer, Anne, Edward and Andrew. And he's also told his children. He's told William and Harry. And of course, Harry lives away in the States, and Harry has decided on hearing that news from his dad that he wants to come and see him, having, not being in the same country and not having that ability just to pop in and drop by. So he has made that decision to come and see his dad. And as we were just hearing there, that theirs has been a difficult relationship in recent years, pretty much ever since Harry and Meghan decided to leave this country and settle and make their life in America.
In terms of him being able to carry out his normal duties, obviously he's not going to be doing visits and public-facing duties, but he apparently is going to continue with his state business. He'll be getting his boxes every day, signing papers, and presumably also talking to the Prime Minister.
Yes, I mean, he can talk to the Prime Minister on the phone, on Zoom, or in public, in the face-to-face during his weekly audiences, if he is well enough to do that. The statement is very much about saying he will carry on doing the key bits of being king. And they're saying that in order for us not to be asking, well, does that mean someone else will have to step up and do some of his duties? They're making very clear that the key bits of the king, which are these state papers, signing documents, he will continue to do. The bit that's missing is the bit that his mother always used to say was equally as important, that element of the royal family being seen out and about to be believed. He will no longer be doing that for an unspecified period of time, because as we've been saying, we don't know the form of cancer he has. We don't know what the treatment he is. We just know it's a schedule of regular treatment. But while he's undergoing that treatment, and during the period of the treatment, and when it's judged that he's well enough to go out and about, there will be this gap, this void, and there aren't that many senior royals at the moment. So the pressure and the person who will most have to step up to the plate, one has to imagine, is the Prince of Wales, William. And it is striking that he, who only a few weeks ago announced that he would be stepping back from doing royal duties while his wife was ill, it was announced just a few hours before the King's announcement came out that William will start to be seen out and about again from Wednesday.